Karen had always been a nightmare of an HOA president. She was the type of person who took neighborhood rules way too seriously, not because she cared about safety or order, but because she loved having control. She had shut down harmless lemonade stands, fined people for having the wrong shade of curtains, and even tried to ban holiday decorations. But nothing compared to the worst thing she ever did. Because when she decided to shut down a Make-A-Wish birthday party for a terminally ill child, she sealed her own fate. The party that meant everything. My son, Jake, had been through more in his short life than most adults could imagine. At just 7 years old, he had been battling a rare form of cancer for nearly 2 years. His treatments were brutal, his energy was limited, and his future was uncertain. But there was one thing that kept him going. His dream of having the ultimate superhero birthday party. Make-A-Wish had graciously stepped in to grant that wish, and with the help of a major charity and a local news station, we had planned something incredible. Themed decorations and costumed superheroes. A live-action performance featuring his favorite heroes. A mini parade through the neighborhood to celebrate him. It was going to be perfect. And after everything Jake had been through, he deserved this. Karen's first move, the complaint that started it all. 2 weeks before the party, we sent out invitations to the entire neighborhood. We wanted everyone to be part of the celebration. Most neighbors were thrilled. But then, I got an email from Karen. It read, "Your upcoming event has not been approved by the HOA and is in violation of noise and street obstruction policies. Unauthorized gatherings are subject to immediate cancellation. You are hereby ordered to cancel your event immediately or face fines of $500 per day." I stared at the email in disbelief. This wasn't just a backyard barbecue. This was a Make-A-Wish event for a terminally ill child. And Karen didn't care. My response, a warning Karen should have taken seriously. I immediately replied, "Karen, this is a Make-A-Wish event for my son, who is battling cancer. The event is fully sponsored and legally approved by the city. I strongly suggest you reconsider your stance before making a terrible mistake." Her response was even worse than I expected. "Your personal circumstances do not exempt you from HOA regulations. Rules are rules. Your event is not permitted. If you proceed, I will have security shut it down." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about rules. Karen was on a power trip. And she was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong family. Karen doubles down, calling security on a child's party. The day of the party arrived. Jake was beyond excited, dressed in his little superhero costume, beaming with joy. The decorations were set up, the performers were ready, and the neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. Then, right before the party started, a security vehicle pulled up. Karen had actually called private security to shut down a Make-A-Wish event. The guard, looking a bit uncomfortable, approached me and said, "We got a report of an unauthorized event." I smiled and handed him a folder full of permits. "Everything is legally approved by the city and sponsored by a registered charity. You have no authority to shut it down." The guard looked at the paperwork, nodded, and said, "Yeah, we're not touching this. Have a good party." Karen, standing nearby, went red in the face. "What do you mean you're not shutting it down?" The security guard shrugged. "They have all the proper approvals. We can't do anything." Karen stormed off, furious. But she wasn't done yet. Karen's biggest mistake, calling the police on the party. 15 minutes later, sirens blared down the street. Karen had actually called the police. For a 7-year-old's Make-A-Wish birthday party. 2 officers got out of their car, looking serious. Karen rushed up to them, waving her hands dramatically. "Officers, this event is illegal. It's disturbing the peace. It's blocking the street. Shut it down immediately." The officers turned to me. I calmly handed them the same folder of permits and said, "This is a city-approved event, sponsored by Make-A-Wish and a local charity. Also, the local news station is covering it today." Karen's face dropped. The officers read through the permits and then glared at Karen. "Ma'am, this event is completely legal. Are you seriously trying to shut down a Make-A-Wish party?" Karen stammered. It's disruptive. It's too loud." One officer shook his head. "This is an event for a sick child. You're the only one complaining." Then he turned to me and said, "Enjoy the party, sir." And just like that, Karen had humiliated herself in front of the entire neighborhood. The final blow are how Karen's actions backfired spectacularly. As the officers walked away, a news van pulled up. The reporter, who had been scheduled to cover the party, got out and asked, "Is it true that someone tried to shut down this event?" The entire neighborhood pointed at Karen. She tried to run inside, but the reporter caught up to her. "Ma'am, can you explain why you attempted to cancel a Make-A-Wish event?" Karen slammed her door shut, but it was too late. By the next morning, the headline was everywhere. HOA president tries to shut down Make-A-Wish party, gets shut down herself. Karen had just made herself the most hated person in town, and the fallout was only just beginning. Karen had done the unthinkable. She had tried to shut down a Make-A-Wish party for a sick child, and now the entire town was about to make her regret it. Because when word got out about what she had done, she became the most hated person in the community. The news story that started it all. By the next morning, the local news station had published their story. In the headline, HOA president tries to shut down Make-A-Wish party, gets shut down herself. It featured footage of Karen arguing with the police, interviews with neighbors calling her actions disgusting, clips of the party continuing while Karen stood there fuming. And within hours, the story exploded. Hundreds of people started commenting. And the responses were brutal. Imagine being this heartless. This lady really thought she could stop a Make-A-Wish event. Karma is coming for her. Who elects people like this? She should never be in charge of anything. Can someone check if she's actually human? Because this is next-level villain behavior. The story spread beyond our town. It was picked up by other news outlets, social media pages, and even national HOA watchdog groups. Karen had gone from a petty neighborhood tyrant to a public disgrace. Karen tries and fails to defend herself. After 2 days of nonstop backlash, Karen finally responded. She posted a long-winded rant in the neighborhood Facebook group. It read, "I'm being unfairly attacked by the media. The HOA has rules for a reason, and I was only enforcing them. That party was too loud and blocked the street. I am the victim here." And the responses were instant karma. "You tried to ruin a dying child's birthday. Sit down. You're the victim. Lady, you brought this on yourself. You had the police called on a 7-year-old's party. Just stop." Within an hour, the post was deleted, and Karen vanished from the Facebook group. But the damage was done. The HOA board starts turning against her. While the entire town was roasting Karen online, something else was happening behind the scenes. The HOA board, her own allies, started panicking. They never expected Karen's actions to go viral. And now, they were getting emails, phone calls, and complaints from homeowners demanding she be removed. At the next HOA meeting, board members confronted her. "Karen, we're getting heat for this. You need to step down." Karen refused. "I was doing my job. I was enforcing the rules." But the board wasn't having it. One member said, "We don't care. The entire town is against us because of you. Either you step down or we vote you out." Karen stormed out, but she didn't realize she had just lost her last line of defense. Because the HOA board was about to throw her under the bus. Karen's fate is sealed. The vote to remove her begins. After the meeting, the HOA board held a special vote. They sent out letters to every homeowner announcing a recall election. The notice read, "Due to recent events and public outcry, we are holding an emergency vote to determine whether Karen Patterson should remain as HOA president." And when the ballots came in, it wasn't even close. Karen lost by 97%. She had spent years terrorizing the neighborhood, and now nobody was willing to fight for her. She was officially removed from her position. The neighborhood celebrates. The Karen-free era begins. The day after the vote, people started celebrating. Neighbors put up balloons and signs that read, "Good riddance, Karen." One family even set up a tiny lemonade stand in their driveway with a sign that said, "Opening this in Karen's honor since she hates fun." And the funniest part, the HOA board, now free from Karen's control, actually joined in. They posted in the Facebook group, "We apologize for past HOA overreach. Moving forward, we will operate with fairness and respect for the community." For the first time in years, the neighborhood actually felt united. And Karen, she had nowhere left to turn. Karen tries to fight back and fails miserably. Even after losing her position, Karen refused to accept defeat. She threatened to sue the HOA for unlawful removal. She tried to start a petition to get herself reinstated. She even sent emails to the city complaining about the Make-A-Wish event again. And each time, she was ignored, laughed at, or blocked. Her reputation was completely destroyed. She had gone from a feared HOA president to a disgraced nobody. And after months of humiliation, she finally gave up. She sold her house and moved away. Karen's final karma, the most satisfying ending possible. A few months later, we heard a hilarious update. Karen had moved to another neighborhood. And guess what? It was also an HOA community. But this time, she wasn't in charge. And when she tried to run for the HOA board there, she was immediately rejected. One of the new HOA board members Googled her name and found a news story about how she tried to shut down a Make-A-Wish event. And the response? Yeah, no thanks. We don't need that kind of drama. Karen had destroyed her own future. And now, she would never hold power again. Karen was gone. Her HOA dictatorship, over. Her ridiculous fines, eliminated. Her reign of terror, distant memory. And now, the neighborhood was finally free. But what happened next was even better than anyone expected. Because once Karen was removed, the HOA underwent the biggest transformation in its history. The first major change, undoing Karen's legacy. The new board wasted no time fixing the mess Karen left behind. At the first community meeting after her removal, the board announced, "We are officially repealing every unnecessary rule Karen put in place." The entire neighborhood erupted in cheers. And within a week, they made 3 huge changes. No more ridiculous fines for harmless things. The board eliminated dozens of Karen's most absurd regulations, including fines for unauthorized holiday decorations, parking restrictions that made no sense, her ban on kids' lemonade stands, fair and reasonable enforcement of HOA rules. Instead of spying on people and handing out fines left and right, the HOA now only stepped in when absolutely necessary. A new community voting system for HOA decisions. No more backroom decisions. No more power-hungry board members. Homeowners could now vote on major rule changes. For the first time in years, the HOA was actually working for the people instead of against them. And the neighborhood immediately felt different. The atmosphere in the neighborhood completely changed. Before Karen's removal, the entire community lived in fear. People whispered about HOA violations like they were criminal offenses. Everyone was paranoid that they'd be fined over some ridiculous rule. Neighbors rarely talked to each other because they were afraid someone might report them to Karen. But now, everything was different. Kids were playing outside again. People actually left their trash cans out without worrying about fines. Neighbors started having backyard barbecues without Karen sending warning letters. And for the first time in years, homeowners actually felt comfortable in their own community. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who Karen once fined for having too many flowers in her yard, said it best. "It's like we finally got our neighborhood back." The HOA board's apology is a surprising moment of redemption. Even though Karen had been the ringleader, some members of the HOA board had enabled her behavior. And after seeing how much the community had suffered, they decided to do something no HOA board had ever done before. They issued a public apology. At the next HOA meeting, the new president, Greg, stood up and said, "We want to acknowledge the mistakes made by the previous administration. The HOA was not meant to be a tool for harassment. We apologize to everyone who was unfairly fined, threatened, or made to feel unwelcome in their own neighborhood. Moving forward, we are committed to rebuilding trust." It was the first time an HOA board had actually admitted they were wrong. And the best part, they didn't just say it. They proved it. The best change of all, a new HOA rule named after Karen. After months of peace and positive change, the HOA board introduced one final reform. They called it The Karen rule. It was simple yet powerful. No HOA board member may use their position to personally harass, intimidate, or unfairly target any homeowner. Any board member found guilty of such actions will be permanently removed. The neighborhood loved it. And the irony? Karen had tried to rule the HOA forever. Now, her name was attached to a rule that ensured no one like her could ever rise to power again. Talk about karma. The Make-A-Wish Party's lasting legacy. After the HOA reforms, the neighborhood wanted to do something special. Because while Karen had tried to ruin the Make-A-Wish Party, it had actually become something bigger. So, the community came together and decided. Every year, we would host a charity event in Jake's honor. The first event, a superhero-themed neighborhood carnival, with costumed characters, games and prizes, a fundraiser to support Make-A-Wish. And when the local news heard about it, they covered the story, calling it From HOA Tyranny to Community Triumph, a neighborhood's incredible transformation. The event was a massive success, and over the next few years, it became an annual tradition. Because of Karen's attempt to ruin one party, the community had now created a lifelong celebration in Jake's honor. She had tried to take something away, and instead, she had helped build something beautiful. Without even realizing it, Karen's reaction, the final, hilarious ending. At this point, Karen had been completely erased from the neighborhood. She had moved away, lost a reputation, and been mocked online. But when she found out that the HOA had created a rule named after her and turned her worst moment into a neighborhood tradition, she lost it. Someone from the old HOA board, who still kept in touch with her, said she was furious. She called me ranting about how the HOA was mocking her and turning her into a villain. I mean, was she really surprised? She had tried to ruin a dying child's birthday. Of course, she was a villain. And now, her legacy would always be a cautionary tale. She thought she was untouchable. But in the end, she was nothing, and our community had never been stronger. The final lesson, how an HOA nightmare created something beautiful. Karen had tried to control everything. She had wanted absolute power. She believed rules mattered more than people. But in the end, she didn't just fail. She became the reason the neighborhood became better than ever. Because once she was gone, the community thrived. Neighbors came together. The HOA finally worked for the people. And every year, we celebrated the event she tried to destroy. Karen had wanted to be remembered as the ultimate rule enforcer. Instead, she was remembered as the woman who lost everything over a Make-A-Wish party. And honestly, it was the perfect ending. Karen thought her actions would be forgotten. She thought she could bully her way back into power. She thought that, in time, people would move on. She was dead wrong. Because what she didn't realize, her story wasn't just a neighborhood scandal anymore. It had become a nationwide example of everything wrong with HOA abuse. And the fallout would be felt across the entire country. How the news went national. After the initial news report about Karen's attempt to shut down a Make-A-Wish party, people thought that was the end of it. But then, the story spread like wildfire. Larger media outlets picked it up with headlines like, HOA president tries to cancel terminally ill child's wish, gets voted out instead. Power-hungry HOA leader exposed after attempting to ruin Make-A-Wish event. HOA Tyrant faces public humiliation after shutting down a child's birthday party. And as the story circulated on social media, it caught the attention of national legal and homeowners' rights organizations. And that's when things really escalated. Homeowners start fighting back against abuse. For years, people had accepted that HOAs could do whatever they wanted. That HOA board members could fine, harass, and threaten homeowners with no consequences. But after Karen's story went viral, homeowners across the country realized they didn't have to take it anymore. And what happened next was a revolution. The rise of the Karen Clause, HOA reforms across the country. In response to the outrage surrounding Karen's abuse of power, multiple homeowners' rights groups began pushing for new HOA regulations. They called it the Karen Clause, a new law to stop HOA overreach. It proposed limits on HOA power to fine and punish homeowners unfairly. Mandatory HOA transparency, no more secret rule changes. Stronger protections for homeowners facing HOA abuse. Automatic removal of any HOA board member who engages in harassment or discrimination. And within months, multiple states began proposing new HOA reform bills because Karen's story had exposed a massive problem. And now, lawmakers were paying attention. Major legal changes, HOAs lose their absolute power. Before Karen's downfall, HOAs had been largely unregulated. But now, lawmakers were cracking down. Several states introduced bills inspired by Karen's case, including California, new regulations limiting HOA fines and requiring due process for homeowners. Texas, a law banning HOAs from shutting down charitable events without legal cause. Florida, a law preventing HOAs from enforcing unreasonable restrictions that violate state and federal protections. New York, a requirement that HOA board members undergo legal training on homeowners' rights before they can take office. One state senator in Texas even referenced Karen's case directly, saying, "This law is necessary because we've seen what happens when power-hungry HOA leaders abuse their authority. No one should have the ability to ruin a child's Make-A-Wish event just because they feel like it." Karen had wanted absolute power over one neighborhood. Instead, she had triggered national HOA reform. And the irony? She had nobody to blame but herself. HOA watchdog groups began tracking HOA abuse nationwide. Karen's scandal had exposed something bigger than just one bad HOA leader. It showed that HOA abuse was rampant across the country. So, in response, several homeowners' rights groups launched online databases where people could report corrupt HOA board members, expose unfair HOA rules, track lawsuits filed against HOAs nationwide. One of these sites even created a hall of shame for the worst HOA abuses. And Karen, she made the list, right alongside other infamous HOA dictators who had been caught abusing their power. Her name had become a permanent warning. A reminder of what happens when an HOA president thinks they're above the law. Karen's reputation is permanently destroyed. After Karen moved away, she tried to start over. She applied for HOA positions in her new neighborhood. But thanks to the online HOA watch list, people quickly found out who she was. And every time she applied, someone would bring up the news articles, the HOA vote, and her public humiliation. One HOA board member from her new neighborhood even told someone, "We Googled her name and saw what happened. No way we're letting her anywhere near the board." Karen had gone from being a feared HOA president to a woman who couldn't even get elected to a local committee. Her past would follow her forever. She wanted to control the neighborhood. Instead, she became a nationwide joke. Karen's final meltdown, the last time anyone heard from her. After months of failing to regain any HOA power, Karen finally snapped. She went on an online rant in a private HOA Facebook group, saying, "HOA laws are being destroyed by entitled homeowners who don't want to follow the rules. This country is turning into chaos because people think they can do whatever they want. I should have more power, not less." The comments were brutal. "Lady, you lost a $350,000 lawsuit over a kid's birthday party. Just stop. You got kicked out of your own HOA. Why are you still talking? No HOA in the country will ever let you run anything again. Give it up." After that, Karen disappeared from social media completely. Nobody heard from her again. She had finally accepted what the rest of the world already knew. Her days of power were over, and they were never coming back. The ultimate irony, how Karen became a national warning. Karen thought she was untouchable. She thought HOA rules were more powerful than real laws. She thought she could bully people forever. But now, her name was attached to HOA reform bills. Her story was taught in law classes as an example of HOA overreach. And the lesson people learned: if you abuse your power, it will come back to haunt you. Karen had tried to control one community. Instead, she became a cautionary tale for every HOA in America. And honestly, that was the greatest karma of all. Karen had tried to take away something special. She wanted to ruin a child's dream. She wanted control. But instead, she ended up uniting an entire community against her. And what happened next was bigger and better than anyone ever expected. Because rather than letting Karen's cruelty define our neighborhood, we turned it into something incredible. The neighborhood comes together, a new annual tradition is born. After Karen's failed attempt to shut down Jake's Make-A-Wish party, something unexpected happened. Neighbors who had never spoken before started coming together. People who had once feared the HOA's wrath now felt empowered to stand up for what was right. And then, someone had a brilliant idea. Why don't we make this a yearly event? At first, it was just a casual suggestion. But then, it caught fire. Suddenly, people wanted to do more. And what started as one birthday party for a sick child became a full-scale community event that changed lives. The first annual Karen-free charity festival. The idea was simple. Every year, we would host a community event dedicated to charity and kindness. The first one was bigger than anything we had ever done before. Local businesses donated food, games, and decorations. A stage was set up for live music and entertainment. The Make-A-Wish Foundation became an official partner of the event. And the best part? All proceeds went to children with life-threatening illnesses. The event was so big that even the local news station covered it. One reporter called it the neighborhood that stood up to tyranny and won. The turnout? Hundreds of people showed up. Families, kids, local businesses, even people from other towns who had heard about what happened. Karen had tried to ruin one birthday party. Now, that same party was raising thousands of dollars for sick children every single year. Talk about poetic justice. Jake's wish lies on the emotional moment that changed everything. During the first official charity festival, there was one moment that stood out above all others. Right in the middle of the event, I was approached by a representative from Make-A-Wish. She told me something that stopped me in my tracks. Because of what you started here, we've been able to grant more wishes for children in this area than ever before. I felt my chest tighten. Because at that moment, I realized what Karen had tried to destroy had actually grown into something bigger than all of us. And when Jake, dressed as his favorite superhero, got up on stage and thanked everyone, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. How the festival became a national movement. The event was so successful that it started gaining attention from outside our town. Other communities heard about what we were doing, and they wanted to do the same. Soon, there were other neighborhoods hosting similar charity events. HOAs being encouraged to support community outreach instead of enforcing ridiculous fines. National attention on how homeowners could take back power from abusive HOA boards. 1 year after the first festival, a reporter called me and said, "Did you know that what you started has inspired other communities across the country?" I was stunned. But when I looked around and saw the hundreds of people smiling, celebrating, and helping others, I realized we had taken Karen's hatred and selfishness and turned it into something pure. Karen tries to erase her past and fails miserably. While our community was thriving, Karen was still dealing with the fallout from her actions. At first, she tried to distance herself from the scandal. She told people that the news had exaggerated the story. She even tried changing her name online to escape the humiliation. But it didn't matter, because the internet never forgets. And every time she tried to move on, someone would bring up the news reports, the HOA vote to remove her, the countless screenshots of her own words trying to cancel a dying child's birthday. She had become a permanent cautionary tale. Her entire identity was now linked to one thing: her attempt to ruin a Make-A-Wish party. And no matter where she went, people never let her forget it. The ultimate irony, Karen's name becomes a joke. A year after Karen left the neighborhood, something hilarious happened. Someone jokingly suggested renaming part of the festival in her honor. Not as a tribute, but as a joke. And before we knew it, a section of the event was labeled the Karen-free zone, a place where people could enjoy games, music, and food without any HOA interference. It became one of the biggest attractions at the event. And the best part, people started using Karen-free zone as a term for HOA-free, fun-friendly areas. Her own name became a meme. She had wanted power and control. Instead, She became the punchline of her own failure. How we finally closed the chapter on Karen for good. After years of battling Karen's reign of terror, the neighborhood finally reached a place of peace. We didn't talk about her anymore. We didn't worry about HOA harassment. And we didn't fear ridiculous rules being enforced just to make someone feel powerful. Karen had tried to divide the community. Instead, she made it stronger than ever. And the final nail in the coffin. Years later, a new family moved into Karen's old house. And when they asked why the neighborhood felt so close-knit and supportive, someone simply said, "It wasn't always like this. But then we had a Karen. And she lost." And just like that, Karen's story faded into irrelevance. The only thing that remained was the festival she tried to destroy. Still thriving. Still helping children. Still proving that kindness always wins. And that was the greatest victory of all. Karen thought she could rewrite history. She thought that, after enough time, people would forget what she did, that the scandal would fade away, and she could regain power somewhere else. But what she didn't realize, her name and actions had already become a permanent cautionary tale. Because what started as a petty HOA power trip had now become one of the most infamous HOA scandals in history. And her legacy wasn't what she had hoped for. It was something far worse. Karen's story becomes an HOA training example. Shortly after the HOA reforms inspired by Karen's downfall, something unexpected happened. A homeowners' rights group compiled a list of the worst HOA abuses in history. And guess who made it? Karen. Right alongside other infamous HOA tyrants who had been sued, removed from office, or publicly exposed for corruption. Her case was now being used as an example in HOA board training programs, legal studies on HOA abuse, homeowners' rights conferences. One HOA consultant even said in a public seminar, "If you ever feel tempted to abuse your power as an HOA board member, just Google President cancels Make-A-Wish party. Trust me, you don't want to end up like her." Karen had wanted to be remembered as the ultimate enforcer of HOA rules. Instead, she had become the prime example of what happens when an HOA goes too far. And the best part, there was nothing she could do about it. Karen tries and fails to erase her online reputation. As the years passed, Karen tried desperately to remove all traces of her scandal. She paid for online reputation management services to try and bury the articles about her. She even threatened legal action against websites that documented her downfall. But the internet never forgets. And every time she tried to make it go away, it just made people look her up again. One homeowner who was considering moving into her new neighborhood even Googled her name and found everything. His response, "Yeah, I'm not buying a house anywhere near that woman." Karen wasn't just a former HOA president. She was now a permanent warning. A lesson for every HOA board across the country. And that was exactly what she deserved. The ultimate karma. Karen gets a taste of her own medicine. Years after she left our neighborhood, I got a message from someone who knew where Karen ended up. And the news was hilarious. She had moved into another HOA community. But this time, she wasn't in charge. And when she tried to join the HOA board there, the existing board immediately rejected her. One of the members even laughed in her face. "Oh, we know exactly who you are. We're not letting you anywhere near this HOA." And the best part, Karen finally got a taste of her own medicine. Her new HOA was just as strict, ridiculous, and power-hungry as she had been. And suddenly, she was on the receiving end of the same harassment she had once inflicted on others. She got fined for minor violations. She got letters threatening her for breaking arbitrary rules. She even tried to file a complaint, only to be ignored. She had spent years enforcing petty HOA rules. Now, she was trapped in a community where she was powerless. And honestly, that was the best karma imaginable. Meanwhile, back in our neighborhood, while Karen was suffering under a new HOA dictatorship, our neighborhood had never been better. The HOA was fair and reasonable. The community was stronger than ever. And every year, we continued to host the charity festival she had tried to destroy. We had turned her attempt at cruelty into something beautiful. In her absence, made everything so much better. One neighbor put it best: "I can't believe we ever let someone like her run things." But in a way, her downfall had been the best thing to ever happen to the neighborhood, because it showed everyone what happens when an HOA board gets too much power. And now, nobody would ever let it happen again. Karen's final fate, the HOA dictator who lost everything. In the end, Karen never recovered. She had lost her position as HOA president, been humiliated on national news, became an example in legal studies about HOA abuse, destroyed her reputation beyond repair. And her biggest mistake was underestimating the people around her. She thought she could bully her way through life. She thought rules mattered more than kindness. She thought she could get away with anything. But in the end, she was completely, utterly, and permanently defeated. And the final lesson was clear. The final lesson, what every HOA should learn from Karen's failure. Karen's story had become legendary, and the message was simple: abuse your power, and it will come back to destroy you. She had gone from ruling a community to being a national cautionary tale. She had tried to silence people, but now her name was attached to HOA reforms across the country. She had wanted to control everything, but in the end, she couldn't even control her own future. Our community's final victory. As the years went by, our neighborhood never forgot what happened. We told new homeowners the story. We kept the annual charity festival alive, and we made sure that no HOA board would ever have unchecked power again. Karen had tried to ruin lives. Instead, she gave our community something to fight for. And that was the ultimate victory. Because while she was struggling under another HOA's control, we were thriving. Karen was gone, but the lessons she left behind would last forever.